during that list, I've become that guy, haven't I, that gets shocked about the speakers. In that list that you read, I thought, I do pray sometimes. Maybe just sometime. So, you're sitting toward the back, and normally I kind of walk up and down and get close to you, but I'm going to stick more to my text today because I don't want to get this wrong. Some of you know we have a 7-year-old and a 5-month-old, and we sometimes sleep and sometimes we don't, and we've been not sleeping of late. So if I kind of went sans notes and talked to you, I might wind up in a bad place, and you don't want to have that. So I'm going to stick a little bit closer to my notes than I might otherwise normally would do. So thank you all for coming. I want to thank the third row there, particularly, or whatever row you were on. About two and a half years ago, I got a chance to travel to Israel and spend 3 weeks there on a pilgrimage. And there were 20 of us that went, and 6 or 7 of the folks are back there with me, so they can attest to the honesty of what I'm saying or not, or tell you what kind of hypocrite I am. So thanks for coming. So I understand this thing is called Prayer for the Nations. And I am supposed to talk a bit about the ministry context I find myself in. What we do, what the challenges are, what God is doing there, how He's moving, how you can be involved. Pull the curtain back so you can see what you don't always see, and pray for what's going on in my ministry context. So I'm not going to do that. Instead, I want to start with a question. You heard a little bit about what I do. Run a faith-based social services organization that does education and healthcare work for adults trapped in long-term poverty. We have 10,000 client encounters every year, including me. I have a staff of 4 other full-time folks, 6 or 7 part-time staff, about 600 volunteers, and my 2013 budget is $925,000. So my question to you is, what is the greatest challenge I face in my job? That's right, none. I play a lot of pool at work, kick back, watch the time go by. Any guesses? Administration, yeah, mostly. Anything else? Time. Time's a challenge. Funding's a challenge. People are a challenge. The biggest challenge, though, is not money, and it's not staff, and it's not managing all the chaos, and it's not lack of sleep, and no one had the guts to say it, but it's not even that I'm a white guy, and a lot of folks I work with aren't. People think that's a big challenge. It's almost never a challenge, I don't think. The real challenge I have in my job is that I'm a Christian, and I have this problem of affiliating with Christians, and that's hard. And you might think, what you talking about? How can that be a hard thing? Well, it's hard because a lot of folks who come through our door don't know what we're doing. They don't understand what we do at MPower. And they think what you're doing can't be ministry unless you're preaching and unless you're baptizing. This is not Christian work right here. Other folks come through our door and they think that all of our work in adult literacy and GED and healthcare and the meeting human needs in our community is just a pretext to get them in and get them saved. That's what we're doing down there, right? Getting them saved. I can deal with that stuff, but the real challenge is the people that we're serving and the people that we work with, the organizations we work with. Because we have to demonstrate that Christians, not all the Christians are the ones that picked up and basically turned our backs on the city and ran. We have to demonstrate that we're not running to our safe communities and our ghettos and hanging out by ourselves and writing off the rest of the community. And that's hard work. So one day, early in my tenure at MPower, I found myself at Starbucks at 5 Points, which is really kind of funny because I love 5 Points, but kind of hate Starbucks. And I was sitting there at a meeting talking about healthcare. How can we expand healthcare access for the dually diagnosed homeless? Those is homeless people that are mentally ill and have an addiction problem. Hard work. And I know it's like it sounds like a joke, but go with me. I found myself sitting with a Jew, a lesbian, and an atheist. And at one point, one of them stopped and looked at me and said, "Why are you here again?" I said, "Well, this is what I do. This is what I'm supposed to do." And she said, "But," one of them said, I don't know which one it was, said, "But isn't MPower, isn't that a Christian organization? I mean, why are you doing this here with us?" I said, "Well, this is what we're supposed to do, right?" And they had the most confused look on their face. Why are you, a Christian, doing this kind of work and with us kind of people? We're not your people. And it dawned on me that really I'm not sure they were any more surprised than would be a lot of the people in the pews in our churches on Sunday if they heard me say, this is what we're supposed to be doing, right? And I began to realize that my occupation is designing and leading and administering this nonprofit, this thing, this vehicle for ministry to take place. But my vocation and my ministry and my calling is doing that kind of work, demonstrating to people and organizations day in and day out that the church has not literally run for the hills, and calling the church to be true to its vocation and not make a liar out of me. That's the hardest part of my job. So every day I work to elaborate and to expand on that we're serious about our work because of our faith, not really in spite of our faith. So what does this look like? What's this ministry, this vocation, this avocation? Well, for us at MPower, it centers around that concept of generational poverty. That is, people who have been poor, they've been in poverty for multiple generations. Me, my mother, my grandmother. People who don't have a high school education and don't know anybody that has a high school education. People who have really never left the city limits of Birmingham. Not the metro area, but the city limits of Birmingham. When I work with people that have never been inside the city limits of Birmingham, which I find to be a real shock. People who, when asked how they are, will tell you the worst thing you've ever heard until you talk to the next person in line, and they can usually one-up the story you've just heard. That's the world we got ourselves mixed up in. That's where we see our calling is. Now, we have people that come through our doors that believe poverty is all about education and money. You get more of one, you get more of the other, and boom, everything is solved. That's fundamentally flawed and naive, and that's not what we do. But that is why generations of government programs have not worked. On the other hand, we have people that come through our doors and think, again, it's all about Jesus. Jesus is the answer. These people need Jesus, and yes, they do. A lot of them already have him, but they need Jesus. But what they really think is if it was just Jesus, then poverty would take care of itself. Now, if you follow that logic out, that would have to mean, Marcus, that India and Africa are the most prosperous nations on the earth, right? The church is broader and deeper and more active in what they used to call third world, now it's called something else, than anywhere else in the West. And yet they struggle every day with basic necessities. So Jesus does not equal coming out of poverty. Something is wrong there with that equation. Or other folks get in this tizzy about personal responsibility and work ethic and pull yourselves up by the bootstraps on one side. And on the other hand, it's all about systems and structures and corporate oppression. And come back, next week, and I'll tell you why that's both right and wrong. But essentially, there is truth in that because we are marred people that work with people marred by sin in a world marred by sin. It's people, it's choices, it's bad luck, it's systems, it's all of it. And that's the way we have to be working. We as a church are pretty good about looking for sin, looking for the sin in the lives of those who are in poverty. We like to quote the verse in the Gospels, Lord, who sinned, this man or his father? But we're not so good about the other side. We're not so good at looking at those systems and structures that help cement one person's bad choice into a lifetime or a generation of being stuck. We don't want to ask those hard questions because we might not like how the answers work out. And it doesn't require us to confront the realities of the communities that we live in and from where we come from. But really, we're not an advocacy group, believe it or not. We're not a think tank. We actually work with real humans and real flesh and blood. And we do this in a number of ways. We do it through adult literacy. Our work is the largest adult literacy program in Alabama. There are 1 in 4 people in our community. 90 to 100,000 adults, native-born Americans, that do not read at a 5th grade level. Normally I keep going at this point, but I'm going to stop and say, that's ridiculous. Most of you come to school in this building every day that will not hush about the Reformation. And in a couple of weeks, I'm marching in a big banner that says Sola Scriptura. And honor as martyrs the people who die so we have the Bible. And there are 100,000 people who can't read the book or any other book. That should be an outrage to us as people of faith. And the Baptists who call themselves people of the book, of which I'm one, we need to do better on this. We do this through our health center, where we provide 6,000 to 8,000 visits every year for people who don't have access to health care. We're quite literally fulfilling Christ's command and continuing his ministry of healing the body and hopefully the spirit and the mind. We do this through GED and career programs, people that could not make it in school for lots of reasons that I won't bore you with. but they could not make it. They don't have the skills to get an education or to find and keep a job. And they come to us convinced that God hates them. God is out to get me. That's why I'm sick. That's why I'm poor. That's why Mama is dead. That's why Daddy left. I haven't given enough money to the guy on TV. God is out to get me. Now, you come into that environment and you tell me, if you think God's out to get you, how much time you're going to spend writing a resume? How much time will you spend learning how to use Microsoft Office? So our work starts right there. You know, we can't prove God loves you, but we want to do a darn good job showing He does not hate you. That's where our stuff begins at MPower, before we get to the education and the literacy and the GED and the healthcare. But believe it or not, I don't really want to talk about what we do at MPower all that much. There's some propaganda around. A little magazine. Our brochure became a magazine, and you can read more about what we do and how we do it in that magazine. I'll be glad to answer questions for you. There's also some other pieces. Let me hold that up, Stacy. More propaganda about helping us pay the bills. And I invite you to come down to Bottle Tree. Yeah, it's a bar. Next Thursday night, Act of Congress is playing. You can come and eat what you eat and drink what you drink and listen to Act of Congress and help us pay the bills to keep this ministry going along. But read about what we do. I can answer questions, but that's not my primary focus right now. I want to talk to you about why I'm not sticking to the script, why I'm not praying for the nations, why I'm not pretending that my work is like international mission field, why I'm not pulling the curtain back for you so you can see and experience something that you can otherwise see. My context is right here in Birmingham, the place that God has chosen to stick me and you. And I suggest to you that as citizens, as residents, as ministers of the gospel in this time and place, it's your responsibility to know what God's doing here in this community. It's your job to figure out where the needs are. It's your job to engage this place where you find yourself. I can stand here and I can tell you all that stuff, or the way I see all that stuff, but I'm doing your work for you. It's your job to engage in this work right here and right now. So let me make a profound statement, so get a pen out. Everybody is somewhere, but you happen to be here. And if we think that somehow and some way God made the world, and if we think in somehow and in some way that He adopted us as His children, and in somehow and in some way He called us in this room to be ministers of the gospel, joint laborers, co-laborers in the ministry of reconciliation, then we have to be reconciled that we are in this place. And wherever we may go in the future and whatever we may do, we are here right now in this place, and that has meaning. I would say to you that your ministry, your education, your life will be shaped in a different way because you're in Birmingham and at Beeson and not somewhere else. Had you been somewhere else in school, had you lived in another city, you'd be shaped in a different way. But God will shape you here differently than He would shape you somewhere else. So what does that mean for you? What will you do about it? So I want to share with you a bit from Jeremiah 29. I was kind of unhappy, frankly, when I saw the chapel schedule and found out that folks preached on Jeremiah, and I wondered who already preached this sermon. And I thought I might give you my best impersonations of faculty and how they might preach it, but I decided that was a waste of time, and I'm not really a good impersonator, and it might come back to haunt me. But I want to read this passage from Jeremiah, and if you must, you can just imagine I'm Robert Smith and how he might read it. But this is where the exiles found themselves in Babylon, and they're camping. They're waiting out, and they're waiting to go back to the promised land. And the prophets are saying, just a little while, God will take us out of this place. And they get a letter from Jeremiah with other advice. And you may remember this, Jeremiah 29, this is just a few verses above the knick-knack verse. You know what I mean? I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you. It's the knick-knack verse. My theory is that God, somewhere back in time, is saying, they're going to love that verse. They can put it on coffee mugs and throws and sell it for $40 at Lifeway. They won't read anything else, but they'll read that point. They'll read how I plan to prosper you, but they won't read the bit above it. The bit where Jeremiah says to the exiles, somewhere he says, "Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, to all the exiles whom I have sent into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon, build houses and live in them, plant gardens and eat what they produce. Take wives and have sons and daughters. Take wives for your children. Give your daughters in marriage, that they may bear sons and daughters. Multiply there and do not decrease, but seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord on its behalf, for in its welfare you will find your welfare." In other words, get comfortable. You're going to be here a while. seek the welfare of the city, which is inextricably linked to my plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Now, if I were preaching, I would preach on this and talk about all kind of stuff you talk about in preaching. If I were talking about MPower, I'd walk you through how the work of MPower is seeking the welfare of the city and end with a call to you to come down and help me. But I'm not doing any of that. I want to go a little different route. And I want to offer you a different interpretation. See, I don't think that for us in this time, in this place, these words in Jeremiah are about going down on Saturday and painting a room in a ministry center. I don't think they're about getting involved in MPower or any other kind of parachurch ministry. I don't think they're about how your church does local missions and how you balance local and international work. I don't think they're about moving to Birmingham so you can make Christ known. You know, he's already there. And I sure don't think it means you and your white church to load up and go down to my neighborhood, the black neighborhood, and do a prayer walk on Saturday morning. What I think this means for us in this place is simply this. Give a damn. Know what's going on around you. Care about where you are. Invest where you happen to be. See that your future and your calling and your ministry, and I might say our redemption, is wrapped up in the place that we find ourselves, for whatever reason and forever long, stuck together. One of the things that drew me to Beeson was this location. It was in Birmingham, still is, Magic City. Well, actually not, which makes the point. I thought I was in Birmingham, and this is not a side tour. I was overseas, and I got in campus housing. I got the letter, and it said, you're going to live in 54 Odom Lane, Homewood, Alabama. And I called up from England and said, I'm going to school in Birmingham. And she laughed at me. I thought it was, just colloquial, I don't know what I'm talking about. But there's more to that than I actually thought. I was attracted to Birmingham. I didn't think about Homewood. But wow, the Magic City, the cradle of the Confederacy, crucible of civil rights. That's a cool place to go to seminary. That'd be a cool place to learn how to be a minister. And I got here, and golly, I could have been in Kansas. I'm not sure that we had any idea that this place and this environment shaped the way we did and understood ministry and context and place. Now, maybe it's better. I think the intercultural or cross-cultural internships has gone a long way in that and things like that. But I really came to realize that was not the seminary's job. That seminaries have a lot to do in a short time to do it in. And it was my job, and now it's your job to figure out what it means to be a student and a minister and a citizen and a resident in this place. It's your responsibility, like it was mine, to figure it out, to put the pieces together and figure out what it means to seek the welfare of the city. What I do every day and how I live my life and how I think we should live our lives, cognizant of where we are. It's our responsibility. Well, why? That doesn't make a lot of sense. Well, some of you are going to be in Birmingham and Alabama forever. Sorry about that. I came here for 3 years. It's been 12. How do you sing the Lord's song in a strange land? I understand that. But here I am. Some of you aren't going to go anywhere. So, in all seriousness, to those of you who are going to be doing ministry in Birmingham and in Alabama, you need to know from whence you come. You need to know 1963, Martin Luther King wrote a letter from a Birmingham jail to the white clergy, and 49 years, 6 months later, I don't think we've yet written back. You have to wrestle with that and understand what that means, the legacy you're inheriting as ministers of the gospel in Birmingham and Alabama. But for the rest of you, you're going to go somewhere. You're going to do something, and you've got to have that. You have that same obligation. You have that same obligation to invest and understand and engage in the community, to figure out what it means to really be accountable for the cure of souls. Now let me preface this next bit with some bio, so you know and appreciate where I'm coming from. I have a bachelor's degree in religion and English lit, an MDiv from Beeson. Let me also a minor in Hebrew and 4 hours short of a minor in Greek. MDiv from Beeson, did graduate work in theology at Oxford, half of an MPA degree, and now in the middle of a PhD program in Auburn. I'm an egghead. I just as soon read Karl Barth as anything else. And not a long time ago, my wife and I went to Duke, and we looked at Divinity schools and for PhD programs. We met Stanley Hauerwas. And at one point, my wife said to Stanley Hauerwas, she said, what would his life be like if we come to school here? And let me say, I don't care what his life is like. I don't know what my life would be like. And Hauerwas said, how long have you been married? I won't bother you with my Hauerwas invitation either. How long have you been married? And Mara said, 4 or 5 years. Okay, you already know he's a compulsive jerk who'd rather read books and talk to you, so it'll be about the same. He was a little bit true. I don't know. Now, I also say, if you know who Harold was, he did not say jerk, but you can fill in your own noun. I say that to say I'm an egghead, so that you hear me when I'm saying that, to say I'm not being self-aggrandizing. I'm saying people don't care as much as I wish they did. The people I work with, the people that you work with and will minister to, don't care. And the debates you have in the common room out there, and the dumb things the other students say, and the crazy professor, they don't really care. Now, they expect you to know it. But they expect you to know them and to know what really shapes their life, that the school board and the Chamber of Commerce and the neighborhood association and the bad boss and all the other crap out there has much more influence on them than our churches and your sermons. They expect you to understand that and know about it and care about it. There was once a time when the pastor was the most educated person in town and the center of town and was sought out for their opinion. That may or may not be good, but it's not the way it is anymore. And I say because we've given up. It's not that people don't want to hear from us, that we've quit trying to have anything to say. So it's your job, I would say, to make them care. It's your job to take the theology and the ethics and the Greek and the Hebrew. Although if you have not figured out with iPads, they can catch you lying about Greek a lot faster than they used to could. Take the theology to our people. It's your opportunity and it's your obligation to show that our faith really does matter and that it really does connect to the real world and has the power to transform our communities, but it has to start with you. It has to start with us. See, I don't think you can read the scriptures. You can't read the church fathers. You can't read the great theologians of our faith and avoid the fact that ours is a political faith. Now with politics, I'm going back to the Greek here. Bear with me. Politikos. Of, for, by the citizens. How we organize our life. What does it mean to live and to be human? And we would say live and be human in relationship to God. How can you read the scriptures and not realize our faith is intimately related to the real and the physical and the material, the here and now? God made a physical world. God revealed himself fully in a physical presence of his Son, the physical reality of his Son. Has promised to recreate a physical world and to not care, to not understand, to not know, to not engage in the systems and the structures and the way our world functions is to really say, I don't care about what you made and I do not care about what you will remake. Now, don't confuse me with politics. Don't confuse this with my use of politics with elections. And we see on TV and Fox and MSC and whatnot. I think elections are kind of like, I think elections to my use of politics is like SEC football to an active, healthy lifestyle. Yeah, a little related. They're both fun. I think elections are fun, and you need to do it. And football's fun. And I told my daughter that I don't care if you like football, you're going to understand it because you live in this place and you've got to be able to talk football. You need to understand it and engage it, but you're not going to get healthy sitting on the couch watching football. And you're not going to engage our society, and you're not going to bring the message of the cross to our community by voting or not voting. What I mean is where the hard stuff is. How do we organize ourselves? How do we live together? The church is the body of Christ, a fellowship of love. Koinonia, these are political words. They have political implications, but it's usually easier to run to our corner and think about spiritual matters. When we don't care about or at some level engage the world around us, our local community, 50 weeks of the year, its economy, its education, its governance, its schools, the basic structural injustices on the one hand and the personal private sin on the other, sins of the inner city and sins of the suburbs, the sins which further our own personal interests and organizational needs. When we don't recognize that the comfortable and the afflicted are not in different communities, they're not in different churches, they're not in different pews, they're the same person. And we're ministering and preaching to the people that on one hand need to be comforted and on one hand are afflicting others. When we don't see that, then I say we are abdicating our responsibility. I submit to you that if we're not engaged in this kind of politics, the real world, everyday stuff of how life works, how we live together or don't, how we organize ourselves, how we live out justice and mercy and humility, if we're not engaged in that kind of politics, it's an incomplete faith and an incomplete call. So if you come to school, some of my classmates did, they came to school and they were camping. They were like the exiles, waiting to get on to where God has sent them. Sort of engaged the school, maybe engaged the church, didn't know the town at all. and they pass their time to get to go somewhere else. If that's you, then I submit that you're not seeking the welfare of the city. If you have any idea what's happening outside the walls of Sanford, or more likely your church or your circle of people that think like you, then you're not seeking the welfare of the city. That's hard, because people think like me, and I can find them, just like anybody else can. But that's not what we're called to do. I think if the church is losing members, and folks are falling away, and Protestants are no longer a majority in our culture, it's not because people don't believe. It's not because people don't want to believe. It's because they don't believe it matters. You know, we've done a horrible, horrible thing. All you folks that may have done volunteer work and service learning and internships and into the streets and whatnot, you've done a horrible thing here. And this is why. We've raised up a generation, of which I'm in, and all you people are, mostly, say if you're not, this generation of people who think they can actually change the world, and that they can do it, and they're supposed to do it, and they're absolutely right. I think that's what God has called us to do. That's what God has empowered us to do. The problem is, they're looking for the church, and they don't see the church answering God's call. Instead of going to somebody else's to look for that. The day I flew out of Birmingham to go to Israel, I sat by a faculty member from Mercer. He said to me, "So what are you doing?" I said, "I'll do this and this, and I'm doing a PhD in public policy." And he said, "Huh." He didn't say anything about 10 seconds, and he said, "Yeah, my son's doing that same thing." And he didn't say anything for another 30 seconds. He said, "It used to be all the young folks that wanted to go out in the world and engage and understand and work out and see how the cross and see how our faith and see how the scriptures apply to the world we live in right now, they went to the church. And everybody's going to public policy. I wonder what that means." It was I'm glad it was a short flight to Atlanta, because I didn't know how I felt about that. You can help stop that. You get to figure out on your own, not have someone like me tell you, on your own what's happening in our community, what God is doing, what the church is doing or not doing. It's up to you then, as ministers and us as ministers and leaders, to live out the courage of our convictions and the totality of our call. My eschatology says that God will not whisk us off to heaven, but recreate for us a new world here, a new city, not a new garden, which will be the perfection of the shadowlands that we live in right now. So I ask that we learn how to be faithful, good citizens, faithful believers in this city. It's a foretaste of the one we'll live in the new city, the one we've been promised. So come along with me.